Alright, so a constellation is essentially a specific area of the celestial sphere, though the term is more often associated with the chance grouping of stars on the night sky. Technically, star groupings are known as asterisms, and the practice of locating and assigning names to them is known as asterism. There are currently 88 officially recognized constellations. Typically, stars in a constellation have only one thing in common. They appear near each other in the sky when viewed from Earth. In reality, these stars are often very distant from each other, and they only appear to line up based on the immense distance from Earth. Since stars also travel in their own orbits through the Milky Way, the star patterns of the constellations change slowly over time.
Alright guys, so to help us look at the night sky, because it's really bright in daylight now, so we want to make sure that we can see those constellations, you should get a constellation sheet, and they have all these individual little constellations you can cut out. And then we're going to need some toilet paper tubes and some glue or tape or rubber bands, whatever you would like to use. And we're going to go through these kind of one at a time, and we are going to make our own constellation viewer. So anytime you want to know what a constellation might look like, we can hold up our viewer and see what it would be shaped like in the night sky. Alright, so the first one we're going to talk about is Taurus, and we can kind of see its pattern there. Taurus constellation lies in the northern sky. It means bull in Latin. The constellation is symbolized by the bull's head. Taurus is a large constellation and one of the oldest ones known. In Greek mythology, the constellation is associated with Zeus, who transformed himself into a bull in order to get close to Europa and abduct her. Taurus is known for its bright stars. The constellation is probably best known for Pleiades, also known as the Seven Sisters, and the Hyades, which are the two nearest open star clusters to Earth. So once we've got our Taurus here, what we're going to do is Taylor's going to get one of our toilet paper tubes, and we're going to poke holes in Taurus where all the little black dots are. So we're going to take a little pin or something like that, and we're going to poke holes. You can make them a little bit big, but you don't want to rip them too big. Make them big enough we can see light through. And then we're going to use a glue stick, and we're going to put glue on the back of the paper. So we're going to put some glue on our paper, and then we want to line up our toilet paper tube over those holes. Then we're going to let it dry, and then you should be able to look through it and see what the constellation would look like. You're Ryan. Sorry, you're fine. Alright, so next is Orion. And Orion, it's a constellation, is one of the brightest and best known constellations in our night sky. It lies on the celestial equator. Orion has also been known since ancient times. The constellation is known as the Hunter and is associated with one in Greek mythology. It's represented by the mythical hunter Orion, who is often depicted in star maps as either facing the charge of Taurus, the bull, pursuing the Pleiades sisters, representing the famous cluster, or chasing the hare with his two hunting dogs, represented by the nearby constellations Canis Major and Minor. The constellation Orion contains 2 of the 10 brightest stars in our night sky. We can also see Orion's belt, which is very prominent in the night sky. Alright, so same thing, we're going to take Orion, we're going to poke some dots on those black holes, and we are going to glue it down to our next tube. So while Taylor poked holes, we're going to go ahead and talk about our next one here. So our next one is our Scorpio, or Scorpius. Scorpius constellation lies in the southern sky. It represents the scorpion and is associated with the story of Orion in Greek mythology. Scorpius is one of the zodiac constellations and was first cataloged by a Greek astronomer in the 2nd century. Scorpius predates the Greeks and is one of the oldest constellations known. The Sumerians called it Gurtab, or the scorpion, about 5,000 years ago. The constellation is easy to find in the sky because it's located near the center of the Milky Way. It contains a number of notable stars and deep sky objects, including the bright stars of the Butterfly Cluster, Cat Paws Nebula, and the Butterfly Nebula, and the War and Peace Nebula. In Greek mythology, the constellation Scorpius was identified with the scorpion that killed Orion, the mythical hunter. The two constellations lie opposite of each other, and Orion is said to be fleeing from the scorpion as it sets just as a scorpion rises. Ursa Major is our next one we're going to talk about. The Ursa Major constellation lies in the northern sky, and it means Great Bear or the larger bear. The smaller bear is represented by Ursa Minor. Ursa Major is the largest northern constellation and third largest constellation in the sky. Its brightest stars form the Big Dipper. It's one of the most recognizable shapes in the sky. Ursa Major is well known in most world cultures and associated with a number of myths. It was one of the constellations cataloged by a Greek astronomer in the 2nd century. In Greek mythology, it is associated with Callisto, a nymph who was turned into a bear by Zeus's jealous wife Hera. Ursa Major also contains a number of notable stars and famous deep sky objects. Among them are the Pinwheel Galaxy, Bode's Galaxy, the Cigar Galaxy, and the Owl Nebula. Ursa Major is a well-known, significant constellation in many of cultures. It is one of the oldest constellations in the sky with a history dating back to ancient times. The constellation is referenced in Homer and the Bible. A great number of tales and legends across the globe are associated with Ursa Major and the bear. Up next is Ursa Minor. The Ursa Minor constellation lies in the northern sky. The constellation means smaller bear or lesser bear in Latin. The Great Bear constellation is represented by its larger neighbor Ursa Major. Ursa Minor was first cataloged during the 2nd century by a Greek astronomer. It is easy to recognize because it contains the famous Little Dipper. Ursa Minor is also notable for marking the location of the northern celestial pole, as it is home to Polaris, the North Star, which is located at the end of the Dipper's handle. The constellation is believed to have been created by Thales of Miletus, a philosopher and astronomer who lived between 625 and 545 BC, and was known as one of the 7 sages of Greece. It is also possible that Thales merely introduced the constellation to the Greeks. He was believed to be descended from a Phoenician family, and Phoenicians frequently used Ursa Minor in the navigation because lying so close to the North Pole, the constellation was an excellent guide to true north. The Greeks sometimes called the constellation the Phoenician. Before it became known as Little Bear, Ursa Minor was known as Dog's Tail or Cynosura in Greek. And then you'll take over from there. That should be about half. Oh yeah, Pisces over here too. Okay. All right, up next we're going to talk about Pisces. The Pisces constellation lies in our northern sky. It means the fish in Latin. Pisces is one of the larger constellations in our sky. It is one of the zodiac constellations first cataloged in the 2nd century as well. Pisces lies between Aries constellation to the east and Aquarius to the west. The two celestial fish represent Venus and Cupid in Roman mythology, who transform themselves into fish in order to escape the monster Typhon. The vernal equinox, the point at which the sun moves to the northern hemisphere across the equator every year, is currently located in Pisces. Pisces constellation also contains a number of interesting deep sky objects, among them the face-on grand design spiral galaxy Messier 74, the Pisces dwarf galaxy, the double radio galaxy, and the colliding galaxy pair ARP284. Pisces constellation is one of Babylonian origin. The Babylonians saw it as a pair of fish joined by a cord. The constellation is usually associated with the Roman myth of Venus and Cupid, who tied themselves with a rope and transformed into fish to escape monster Typhon. The star Alpha Piscium, also known by the traditional name Alreshka, marks the knot of the rope.
So this one is Cassiopeia. The Cassiopeia constellation is located in the northern sky. It was named after Cassiopeia, the vain and boastful queen in Greek mythology. The constellation was first cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy, right?
Ptolemy.
Can never, why? Okay. The constellation was first cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century, along with other constellations in the Perseus family. Cassiopeia is easily recognizable in the sky because of its distinctive W shape. The constellation contains several notable deep sky objects, among them the open clusters Messier 52 and Messier 103, the Heart Nebula and the Soul Nebula, the supernova remnant Cassiopeia A, the star-forming cloud popularly known as the Pacman Nebula, and the White Rose Cluster. In mythology, Cassiopeia was the wife of King Cepheus of Ethiopia. Once, she boasted that she was more beautiful than the Nereids. The Nereids were the 50 sea nymphs fathered by the Titan Nereus. They were enraged by Cassiopeia's comments and appealed to Poseidon to punish Cassiopeia for her boastfulness. Poseidon was married to one of the nymphs. So this one here is the Pegasus constellation, which lies in the northern hemisphere. It is one of the largest constellations in the sky. It was first cataloged by the great astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. The constellation was named after Pegasus, the winged horse in Greek mythology. The constellation is known for the Great Square of Pegasus, a familiar asterism in the northern sky, as well as for a number of bright stars and deep sky objects, among them Messier 15, Stephan's Quintet of Galaxies, the Einstein Cross, and the unbarred spiral galaxy NGC 7742. In Greek mythology, Pegasus is a white-winged horse that sprang from the neck of the Gorgon Medusa when Perseus beheaded her. Medusa was a beautiful young woman before she was turned into a monster by the goddess Athena after being caught being defiled by the sea god Poseidon in the goddess's temple. Athena turned Medusa's hair into snakes and made her face so ugly that anyone who looked at her immediately turned to stone. This is the Bootes constellation, which lies in the northern hemisphere. It is one of the largest constellations in the sky. Bootes was first cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. The constellation is home to Arcturus, the third individual brightest star in the night sky after Sirius and Canis Major and Canopus and Carina constellation. Bootes is traditionally depicted as a herdsman with 2 hunting dogs on a leash and a club in his other hand. In the sky, Bootes follows Ursa Major around the pole. In one story, the constellation represents a plowman driving the oxen in the Ursa Major constellation, followed by his 2 dogs, Asterion and Chara. The plowman's oxen are tied to the polar axis, and their movement keeps the skies in constant rotation. Alright, so this one is the Gemini constellation, which is located in the northern hemisphere of the sky. Its name means the twins in Latin. Gemini is one of the zodiac constellations first cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. The constellation represents the twins Castor and Pollux. This is the Gemini constellation, which is located in the northern hemisphere of the sky. Its name means the twins in Latin. Gemini is one of the zodiac constellations, which was first cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. Gemini is known mainly for its 2 bright stars, Castor and Pollux, the neutron star Geminga, and several notable deep sky objects, among them the open cluster Messier 35, the Eskimo Nebula, the Jellyfish Nebula, and the Medusa Nebula. Gemini constellation represents the twins Castor and Polydeuces in Greek mythology. The brothers were also known as the Dioscuri, which means sons of Zeus. In most versions of the myth, however, only Polydeuces was Zeus's son, and Castor was a son of the mortal king Tyndareus of Sparta. So this one is Sagittarius constellation, and it lies in the southern sky. It is one of the constellations of the zodiac. It represents the archer, and Sagittarius is usually depicted as a centaur holding a bow and arrow. It is also associated with Crotus, the satyr who kept company of the Muses on Mount Helicon. Sagittarius was one of the largest southern constellations. It is easy to find because it lies on the Milky Way, and its brightest stars form an asterism known as the Teapot. Like other zodiac constellations, Sagittarius was first cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. In Greek mythology, Sagittarius represents a centaur, a half-man, half-horse creature with the torso of a man and the body and 4 legs of a horse. The centaur is depicted as aiming an arrow toward the heart of the neighboring constellation Scorpio, represented by the red supergiant star Antares. Sometimes Sagittarius is wrongly identified as a centaur Chiron, represented by the constellation Centaurus. Alright, so this next one is the Leo constellation, and this one also lies in the northern sky. It is one of the zodiac constellations and one of the largest constellations in the sky. Leo represents the lion and is usually associated with the Nemean lion in Greek mythology. The constellation was first catalogued by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century, along with all of the other constellations of the zodiac. Leo constellation is home to the bright stars Regulus and Denebola, the nearby star Wolf 359, and to a number of famous deep sky objects, among them galaxies Messier 65, Messier 66, Messier 95, Messier 96, Messier 105, and NGC 3628. Leo is one of the oldest constellations in the sky. Archaeological evidence suggests that Mesopotamians had a constellation similar to Leo as early as 4000 BC. The Persians knew the constellation as Shire or Sur. Babylonians call it Urgula. Syrians knew it as Iro, and the Turks as Artan. So this next one is the Hercules constellation, which is located in the northern sky. This was named after Hercules, which in turn was often associated with the Sumerian hero Gilgamesh, and the constellation itself has a long history dating back to Sumerian times. Hercules is the 5th largest constellation in the sky, but has no first magnitude stars. In traditional depictions, the star Ras Algethii represents Hercules' head, and a prominent asterism, the keystone, marks his torso as he stands victoriously on Draco's head. In mythology, the constellation Hercules is usually associated with the penultimate labor of Hercules, which involved killing the dragon Ladon, who guarded the garden of the Hesperides. The dragon is represented by the constellation Draco. Hercules constellation was first catalogued by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. Alright, so Canis Major is a constellation which is in the southern sky. Its name means the greater dog in Latin. Canis Major represents the bigger dog following Orion, the hunter in Greek mythology. The dog is often depicted pursuing a hare, represented by the constellation Lepus. The smaller dog is represented by the neighboring constellation Canis Minor. Both constellations were first catalogued by Ptolemy in the 2nd century. Canis Major is home to Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, as well as several notable deep sky objects: the Canis Major dwarf galaxy, the open cluster Messier 41, the emission nebula NGC 2359, and the colliding spiral galaxies NGC 2207 and IC 2163. Canis Major is commonly taken to represent the greater dog following the hunter Orion in Greek myth. The constellation is depicted as a dog standing on its hind legs pursuing a hare, represented by the constellation Lepus. So this one is Perseus, and this constellation lies in the northern sky next to Andromeda. It was named after the hero Perseus in Greek mythology. Perseus is one of the larger northern constellations, and it was first catalogued by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. The constellation is best known for its annual Perseid meteor shower. It is also home to the famous variable star Algol Beta Persei. Perseus also contains a number of famous deep sky objects, among them Messier 34, the double cluster, the California Nebula, and the Little Dumbbell Nebula. The constellation Perseus represents the Greek hero Perseus in the sky and is one of the 6 constellations associated with the myth of Perseus. Perseus was the son of Danae, daughter of King Acrisius. Acrisius ruled Argos, and after an oracle foretold him that he would die at the hand of his own grandson, he had locked away Danae in a dungeon. Zeus fell in love with her and took the form of Golden Rain to visit her. When the rain fell into her lap, Danae got pregnant. Acrisius found out about the pregnancy, and once Perseus was born, the king locked both his daughter and grandson into a wooden chest and cast them out to sea. And last but not least is Cygnus, which is a prominent constellation in the northern sky. Its name means the swan in Latin, and it is also known as the Swan constellation. Cygnus is associated with the myth of Zeus and Leda in Greek mythology. The constellation is easy to find in the sky as it features a well-known asterism known as the Northern Cross. Cygnus was first cataloged by the Greek astronomer Ptolemy in the 2nd century. Notable objects in the constellation include Cygnus X1, a famous X-ray source, the bright stars Deneb and Albreo, the Fireworks Galaxy, and several well-known nebulae, the Pelican Nebula, the North America Nebula, the Crescent Nebula, and the Veil Nebula. Cygnus constellation is associated with several myths, most frequently the one of the Spartan queen Leda, who gave birth to 2 sets of twins, the immortal Pollux and Helen, and mortal Castor and Clemenstra, after being seduced by the god of Zeus, who had transformed himself into a swan. The immortal children were fathered by the god, and the mortal ones by Leda's husband, King Tyndareus. Castor and Pollux are represented by the zodiac constellation Gemini.
Alright guys, so since we have now learned a little bit about our constellation and we have our constellation viewers all made, we're going to put those to the side and we're going to move on to our next activity where we're going to talk a little bit about space and how things explore. So we know that these are up here, but how do we understand space and know what it is? Well, it's actually because we send people up into space to study the stars and the planets and our Milky Way and things like that. So for a fun activity we're going to talk about rockets and how they work. So for that we're going to need some cardstock or canvas. You're going to need some film canisters, paint, you can choose any colors you want, and water. So what we're going to do, and we're also going to need our Alka-Seltzer. We're also going to need Alka-Seltzer for this one. So but you're going to want to make sure we do this outside, but how we do it is we're going to take our film canisters, and I picked 4 colors, so I'm going to do 4 different rockets. To start, we're going to take our lid off of each one of them. And we're going to put a little bit of paint in each one. We want to make sure, because we're also going to use water in here, so we've got to thin down the paint a little bit so it'll fly a little easier. So I'm going to also grab a stir stick so we can stir it up a little bit. Where did they go? Here we go. Okay. Alright, so I'm also going to use a stir stick. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our paints and we're going to pour some in our canisters. We don't want to fill them all the way up because we also want to thin it down with water. So put a little bit in there, maybe about 1/4 of the way up. And we don't need a ton of water, we just want enough to thin it down a little bit. And we're going to use our Alka-Seltzer to create a little bit of a reaction. Alright, so now we're going to put a little bit of water in them. Use our thing here. Alright, so we're going to start with just a little dab of water at a time until it's kind of a soup mixture. Kind of running, need just a tad bit more. So something like that, we can see how it kind of runs off. I guess I should grab more than one stuff. Alright, so we're going to go through and mix in all of our waters and paints to make sure they're nice and liquidy, kind of a soup texture in there. Alright guys, so now that we're outside, we're going to have our stuff spread out, and you're going to want you actually do this step back because paint is going to fly everywhere. So now that we're out here, we have our paint mixed with our water. We're going to go ahead and take our lids back off. Don't lose them though, because we are going to need these. You're going to get messy, and that's okay. That's the fun of summer. All right, and so then next what we're gonna do is you're going to need an Alka-Seltzer tablet for each paint that we have. So you're probably gonna wanna break these up a little bit. Once we drop the Alka-Seltzer in, put the cap back on, give it just a slight shake, and put cap down on our piece of paper. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get ours ready. I'm gonna try to do all mine at once. Put the Alka-Seltzer in, you may have to break it up just a little bit. And then once you get it in, put the cap on it real tight, flip it upside down on your paper. We'll see if it's gonna work. Scared the piss out of me. Alright guys, so as you've seen, they shot up some, and you can play with this more, so you could add more paint, you could add more water. So once we do this, I don't know if they'll re-go again, you can see. But our Alka-Seltzer causes a fizzy reaction in our paint. So as that water and our Alka-Seltzer mix, it actually causes a little bit of an explosion to happen. And so far it gives our rocket the chance to blast off. So you'll notice the more you use it, if you still have some liquid in there, your reaction time may slow down a little bit, but the less water that's in there sometimes, the more of a reaction you're going to have. You're also, like I say, going to get very messy, so make sure we have something to wipe our hands on and make sure we're doing this outside. The moon does not actually emit light like the sun does. What we see when we see the moon is actually sunlight reflected off of the moon. The phase of the moon is how much of the moon actually appears on Earth to be lit up by the sun. Half of the moon is always lit up, except during an eclipse, but we only see a portion that is lit up. This is the phase of the moon. Around once per month, every 29.53 days to be exact, the phases of the moon make a complete cycle. As the moon circles the Earth, we can only see a portion of the lit up side. When we see 100% of the lit up side, this is what we call a full moon. When we can't see any of the lit up, this is what we call a dark moon or a new moon. As the moon orbits or circles the Earth, the phases change. We'll start with what is called the new moon phase. This is where we can't see any of the lit up side of the moon. The moon is between us and the sun. As the moon orbits the Earth, we can see more and more of the lit up side. Finally, the moon is on the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, and we get a full moon. As the moon continues to orbit the Earth, we now see less and less of the lit up side. The new moon and dark moon are pretty much the same phase, happening at almost the same time. As the new moon begins to orbit, when we see more and more of the moon, this is what we call waxing. After the moon gets to its full phase, we start to see less and less of the moon. This is called waning. A lunar calendar is one based on the orbit of the moon. A lunar month, 29.53 days, is slightly shorter than an average standard month, which is 30.44 days. If you only had 12 lunar months, then you would end up around 12 days short of a year. As a result, very few modern societies use a lunar calendar or month. However, many ancient societies measure their time in lunar months or moons. A lunar eclipse is when the Earth is exactly between the moon and the sun, and none of the sun's rays can actually hit the moon. A solar eclipse is when the moon exactly blocks the sun's rays from hitting the Earth. A lunar eclipse can be seen from anywhere on the dark side of the Earth. A solar eclipse can be seen from certain places on Earth, as the moon only blocks the sun for a small area. Solar eclipses always happen during the new moon phase. Alright, so what we're going to need for this activity, we're going to practice our moon phases. And what we need is Is some Oreos. We use Mega Stuff so that we have more of the cream filling in there to help us show our moon phases. We're going to need a knife, a plate, a stick, something we can use to kind of cut that. And then this chart that you guys can get from us, and it shows the new moon phases. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our little popsicle stick out. Alright, so we're going to use a popsicle stick, and we're going to take our first Oreo, and we're going to start with the new moon. And we said the new moon is our dark moon phase. Write these on our paper. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to keep one side of the cookie without any cream on it. So we're going to twist kind of slightly. It comes up. So our new moon is our dark side of the moon. So we're going to just use this side right here. So that represents our new moon because it's completely dark. Moving on, so we've had our new moon. We're moving around a little bit. We're starting to see just a little sliver of our moon appear. This is called our waning crescent. So take the top of the Oreo off, and this time we're going to leave just a little sliver of our crescent on there. So it looks something like that. That is our waning crescent. Next is our last quarter. So again, we're going to take the top of the Oreo off. And this one is almost where we can see about half of the moon. So we're going to take and cut about half of that. So there is our last quarter. Our next one is a waning, so we've come around almost to our full moon. So this time we're going to take out just a little bit of the white and leave a good portion of the chocolate cookie under there. Our next one is a full moon, so this is where we're going to see the moon lit up the most. So this time we're going to take the Oreo top off, and we're going to have just our full moon there, so we can see all of that pretty light. So next we're going to start going back up towards our new moon again. So this one is, we're getting into our waxing phase. So this one, carefully take our Oreo top off again, and we're going to have most of our moon lit up, kind of like over here. So this time we're just going to remove a small portion from the outside edge. And then we have our waxing. All right, and then again, we're moving into another quarter. So most of our moon is going to be showing, about half of it on this time. So again, we're going to remove about half. All right, and we have one last one. So now we're going to get back to our waxing crescent. And our waxing crescent is where we're going to see about a little corner, a little sliver of our moon looking something like that. So it goes right here. So now let's give you guys a close-up of our complete moon cycle. All right, guys, so there's our complete cycle, and we can look at our chart right next to it. So we go from our full moon, from our new moon, we go from our new moon all the way around, then we come to a full moon where we see all the light, and then it slowly starts going back again. So that is our complete moon cycle. Once you have your moon cycle, feel free to get a delicious snack of an Oreo. Alright guys, so now that we've talked about our moon phases, we made some rocket paintings, and we've talked a little bit about our constellations. We have our constellation viewers, but we also want to do this really fun luminary. So you'll get a little sheet, you'll have to cut this out, but what we're going to do is we're going to fold it to create a little box. After we go through, and all these little white dots we have to poke holes in. So we're going to go through and poke our little holes. This has many of the constellations we already talked about labeled for us, plus a few others I think might be on here. It had some of the stars named. So when you go outside at night to look at the constellations, you can take this with you and maybe help to identify some of those constellations and our stars. Try not to poke yourself doing this. We're going to start, you'll see a little tab on the end here. We're going to put glue on the colored portion of that. We're going to fold it around. So Scorpio should be sitting on top of that colored portion. Okay, then we have some bottom tabs here. We want to go ahead and put the glue on the two short ones. We're going to fold them in. You'll see a little tab on this long one. You're also going to put a little glue on that, because that's what's going to create the bottom of our box. Probably going to want a little adult help or a buddy help here. Just trying to fold it and glue at the same time can be a little difficult. Alright, then we're going to light up our tea light, or LED light, and put in there. And then we're going to do the same on the top. So we have two side pieces and a little piece here on the top. We're going to glue those. Fold them down. All right, and then we can see, piece ain't glued all the way just yet, but you can see that our light illuminates our luminary here. And you're able to see that it lights up all of our constellations, so we can see them just how they would appear in the night sky. Okay, so now we've looked at a little bit of everything. We made some constellation luminaries, we made some constellation viewers, we've made rocket painting. Now we're going to get into some more fun stuff, and we are going to make our very own moon rock. So for this, we're going to need a bowl. We're going to need something to stir with. We're going to need water, baking soda, food coloring. We're going to use black for this because we want them to look like we found them on the moon. So we're going from outer space. Forgot to grab that one over here. All right, so we got these little gel food colors from Walmart, and they had black in them already. So we're going to get our black one out. And then we're going to add in silver and or gold glitter because we want them to kind of sparkle. All right, so first of all, we're going to start by mixing in our bowl 4 cups of baking soda. What are you doing?
Trying to get this thing from
I'll put it from the top. All right, so after we got our 4 cups of baking soda in here, then we're going to take a 1/4 cup of water. We're going to take our black food coloring. We're going to have to play with this because we don't know exactly how much black food coloring we're going to need. So we're going to put a few drops in and then mix some more in. And then we're going to put in our silver and gold glitter. Add in a little bit of our gold and a little bit of our silver. And we're going to give it a nice stir. If it's not mixing real well, we may have to add just a little bit more water, or we may have to add a little more black, so we're gonna have to kind of mix this in until we get to the color and the consistency and the shininess that we want. I know. It says black. I'm gonna add some more food coloring in because it isn't quite dark yet. More silver in there. Properly. We're going to use most of the black. Alright, once you got it all mixed into the whatever color you want, as black as you want or as gray, ours is kind of more grayish green color. Then you get to form it and make moon rocks. These are things you can play with as much as you want. You can form them, you can break them apart, as Taylor's doing. And you have a nice, fun moon rock. And you can see all the glitter in there to kind of represent those crystals we might see or other things we might see out in space. Alright guys, so if you can get this all cleaned up, you're definitely going to need to wash your hands after this really well. At least Mary Beth is going to need to. Wash your hands really well, and you can play in this for a few days because all it is the baking soda and water and some food coloring and glitter. So it's a fun, easy thing to do and can help us remember our space explorations today.
Alright guys, so now that we've explored space some and we know a little bit about what's up there, our moon and our stars and constellations, why did we include that in a week about weather? Well, one thing is space has its own weather. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But space and things that we find in space like our moon can also affect weather here on Earth. So some things we mean by that, our moon can affect our tides. So that can create large amounts of rainfall. So if the moon is very high in the sky, it can create a bulge in the atmosphere that can then create large amounts of rainfall below that bulge. So it's really important that we understand that weather isn't just affected here on Earth. It's affected by things outside of Earth, like our moon and things like that. We've also been able to detect air pressure changes linked to the exact position of the moon. That was first detected all the way back in 1847. The temperature, so did you know that when the moon is higher, overhead or underfoot, the air pressure can actually be higher too? Pretty interesting, right? When the moon is overhead of us, its gravity causes Earth's atmosphere to bulge towards it, so it kind of pulls towards it. So that the pressure or the weight of the atmosphere on that side of the planet will actually go up as well. Higher pressure increases the temperature of the air below. Alright, so now that we've talked about how the moon and things affect our rainfall and our tides here on Earth, we're going to talk a little bit about actual space weather as well. So different space weather can occur, and it can actually have effects here on Earth, not just with our weather, but our technologies as well. So solar flares are something that happens a lot, and they can produce very strong X-rays that can actually degrade or block high-frequency radio waves that are used for radio communication. We can also have coronal mass ejections that can cause geomagnetic storms on Earth and actually cause currents that run underground and actually take out whole power operations or grids. They can also affect signal navigation through our GPS and things like that.